There are so many videos out there about escaping RuneScape's mid-game, and they all have great information. But somehow, you still feel stuck in the seemingly endless quagmire that is Oldschool Runescape's mid-game. In this video, I want to provide you with a very clear set of goals on how you can once and for all progress into the endgame. And luckily, due to several updates throughout the years, this is easier than ever. But first, I wanted to talk to you about the problem at hand. The problem is you. Or more so, your mindset. What even is the mid-game? Why do you feel stuck in it? I guarantee you that on this video, I'm going to have an equal number of comments telling me that these are either early game or late game, or that I'm an absolute moron, and they are correct on all three accounts. Defining the mid-game is a little bit meaningless because it does mean something different for everybody. To me personally, escaping the mid-game means that you have the skills and gear that allow you to be able to reasonably complete endgame content like raids or the Inferno. Notice that I broke this down into skills and gear. Max gear is ludicrously expensive compared to where it used to be. I started on day one of Oldschool RuneScape, and you were basically maxed out if you had a Zerker helm and a whip. This is what the ultimate Chad of 2013 looks like. Fast forward to God War's dungeon, with about 100 to 200 mil, you could have everything. Then today, you have a 10,000% increase with max gear costing over 10 billion GP. This can be super overwhelming, and it's probably a contributing factor of why you feel stuck with this insurmountable mountain of gear requirements to climb. I'm here to tell you, you don't need full max gear to enjoy endgame content. Fantastic, you don't need 10 billion GP to escape the mid-game, but where should you start? I know I started off my last video with this one, but get your quest cape. Realize that this is a long-term goal. You're not going to blast them all out in one sitting, but it is something you should be working on. Personally, I find it really hard to get into a questing mode, but once I get one started, it's really easy to chain the rest of them. Make sure you download the Quest Helper plugin. It basically does the quest for you, and it makes them like 20% as long as they normally are. Getting these quests completed is the single most influential thing you can do for yourself. You will unlock the entire map and you familiarize yourself with all of the areas and resources in it. The quest skill requirements are going to give you a good baseline for other content and a structured leveling plan. The quests themselves reward you with a ton of experience and important gear upgrades that I will be talking about next in this guide. If you've ever looked into this topic, you've probably been told to get your Untradables completed. Untradables refers to items that cannot be bought from other players. The first one of these that you should be going for is the Barrow's Gloves. Barrow's Gloves are unlocked from the Recipe for Disaster quest, and for like 10 years, Barrow's Gloves were best in slot for all styles. And while they have been replaced by endgame gloves, they're extremely strong and are likely to be your go-to glove until you are well past the mid-game. Completing the Animal Magnetism quest is going to allow you to buy Ava's devices, notably the Ava's Accumulator, which is going to help you save ammo when you are training the range skill. Once you complete the Dragon Slayer 2 quest, you should continue killing Vorkath until you get Vorkath's head. With the Vorkath's head, you are able to get your hands on the Ava's Assembler, which is RuneScape's best in slot range cape. Not only is this a must-have for your account, Vorkath is one of the best mid-game moneymakers and a great introduction to PVM. Get those hands shaking, boys. It's time for you to get your fire cape. Your biggest enemy in getting your first fire cape is yourself. With Jad, there's really nothing too difficult about changing your prayer once every 5 seconds. It's the pressure of the situation that gets to a lot of people. The hardest part about your first fire cape is your nerves. To take on your first cape, I recommend 75 range and a blowpipe. This is going to make a lot of the enemies very quick and easy for you. Rune Crossbow is great for long range, and honestly, if you're pretty good at the game, you don't need to get a blowpipe. You can do it with the Rune Crossbow. It's just going to be pretty painful and very, very slow. You're going to be wanting to rock Blessed D'hide. It gives you that small prayer bonus, which does matter, and it's just really good range gear for the cost. And optionally, if you can get a Slayer task, it's going to be much quicker if you already have an imbued Slayer helm, since it is going to give you that extra damage and accuracy bonus. I don't really recommend waiting around to get your Slayer task. It's not that bad off task just to get your first cape. It's going to be your best in slot melee cape until you're able to do the Inferno, and it's going to give you a really valuable experience in learning your first real PVM encounter. You're going to have to learn how to move and do damage, change prayers, heal all at the same time. time, and this is going to help you a lot when you get to more difficult challenges down the road. Next up, head on over to Barbarian Assault because you are getting yourself a torso. I think this is a good time to mention that you don't have to do these in any particular order. This is just a good guideline for goals to get you to the next level of gameplay. You hear a common complaint that it's impossible to find a team, people leave halfway through a round, but this can be easily mitigated by making your own team and being selective about who you recruit, and watching a guide on your role before you go in so you're not so bad that other people have to leave. There's tons of fantastic guides out there, and honestly, Defender's the easiest role. It's just that so many people can't be bothered to spend 3 minutes watching a guide. And the reason you're going to spend an hour and a half at Barbarian Assault to get the torso is that it gives you the same strength bonus as a Bando's chestplate, just without the defense. Next up, you'll be getting your Dragon Defender. To get this, you need to kill Cyclopses in the Warriors Guild who sequentially drop the Defenders from Bronze up to Dragon. This grind requires a combined attack and strength level of 130. While this can take a while, it is absolutely worth it. The Dragon Defender is very strong. It's time for you to unlock your Mage Arena capes. I would do these as you get the magic requirements for this. Mage Arena 1, you just need 60 Mage, but for Mage Arena 2, you do need 75 Mage, and to charge up these 3 staffs, there's this whole quest throughout the wilderness to kill these 3 bad guys. It's a little bit tedious, but it's definitely worth it. The Mage Arena 2 cape is RuneScape's best in slot magic cape, and does provide a magic damage bonus, which you don't see in a lot of gear at this tier. If I did miss any of the untradables, please let me know in the comment section below so the other people can see it as well. And if you are enjoying the video, please make sure to drop me a like. It helps recommend it to other people, and it's one of the biggest things you can do to help me grow as a creator. Thank you so much. Before we move on to the next section of this video, I did want to establish some basic gear guidelines for all of your combat styles. Some solid melee upgrades starts with the Helm of Nitzanot. You're going to get this from the quest cape anyways. The Abyssal Whip is going to be your strongest melee weapon for a very long time. The Verax Skirt provides you with both defense and prayer bonus. Dragon Boots are going to be your best boots until you're willing and able to spend 30 mil on Primordials. The Amulet of Fury is a great jack of all trades amulet, and the Berserker Ring Eye is definitely worth investing in as well. The total cost for this setup is going to run you 9.2 mil. For the range setup, we are going to carry over some of our other pieces like the Barrow's Gloves and the Amulet of Fury, but we are going to be rocking Blessed D'hide. Just choose whichever one looks the coolest to you. I like the Dragon Crossbow, but if you don't want to spend 1.6 mil on it, Rune Crossbows pretty decent and very accurate as well. The Blowpipe is going to be a devastating ranged weapon on enemies with low defense. It is a must cop. And then Snakeskin Boots are going to be a really good alternative to any of the higher priced boots if you don't want to shell out for them. They're like 100 GP and they're pretty decent for what you're paying. I'm also featuring the Armadillo book in this as it's very cheap right now and it does give you some range accuracy. Total cost for this is 7.8 mil, but that also includes the Fury from the previous setup. For magic, we don't need anything fancy at this point. Mystic Robes are more than good enough. If you got extra money, Arams are better. The Occult Necklace is the strongest piece of magic gear available. It's worth the 600k. It might not seem like it, but you need this. Absolutely get it. Ancient Staff is going to be great for bursting and barraging our Slayer tests. Trident of the Swamp is going to be great for our DPS. And then something that I didn't mention in the melee setup is that you should get a blessing as well. At this point, just buy any blessing off the Grand Exchange, but eventually you will want to get the current blessing. Next, you got to get your stats up. Everyone's going to be starting at a different spot here, but our end goals are all going to be the same. In order to do most endgame content, you're going to want at least 90 attack, strength, and defense, 90 range, and 94 magic. These are great goals to have, but how should you go about training them? Really, this part's up to you. RuneScape's just a game that we play in our free time, so do whatever method you enjoy most. But the correct answer is Slayer. Slayer breaks up the monotony of training, it gives you access to new monsters, and it provides you with the ability to use the Slayer Helm's boost of almost 17% on certain bosses. Make sure that you burst all of your Slayer tests, that you can clump, and 94 magic will come very fast. For the other tests, you can melee them with your best DPS gear, use your cannon, and for range, I recommend using the blowpipe. Sometimes you just need something a little more AFK. If you work from home, crabs. Headed to the gym? Crabs. Ruining a first date? Crabs. You could also do Nightmare Zone, but personally, I prefer crabs. So what about the other skills? You know, the boring ones. Although it's not super pertinent to endgame PvM, I do think it's worthwhile to train up your normal skilling style skills in order to engage in other pieces of content. I think a good goal for this section would be to complete all of your hard diaries. The requirements really aren't that bad, they're just a little bit higher than the quest cape. The diaries provide a great framework for which skills to train and how high to train them. They'll give you a ton of experience lamps, and they'll also give you a ton of extra little perks. There's a bunch of different teleports, some of my favorites being the Sears Bank teleport, the Grand Exchange teleport. You get the mole locator, and you get extra runes at Barrows. You are right on the cusp of entering the endgame. Honestly, your account with the stats that we had mentioned previously can do any piece of content in the game. The only thing you're currently lacking is the skill in order to do it, and some gear items, but that will come with time. But how do you actually get better at the game? Jagex basically made an in-game PvM tutorial known as the Combat Achievements. These are a collection of challenges which force you to become comfortable with all of RuneScape's bosses. A good first goal is going to be tackling the hard combat achievements. The hard tier will make sure that you are adept at all of the entry-level bosses like Barrows, the Chaos Fanatic, but it will also give you your first taste of the mid-game staple that is the God Wars dungeon. While learning these higher level bosses, you are also opening up your possibilities of making much more money and thus buying better gear, which will speed up your ability to make more money. It's a cycle, right? So God Wars Dungeon right now, Kriara is about 6 mil an hour, Bandos is like 5 mil an hour, you got Muspa, you got Zora, you got Vorkath, you got all the classic mid-game staples, and you are going to be starting to make a good amount of cash. I'm not going to do a whole gear progression guide here for you. I already have 3 of those posted on my channel, but I did want to lay down the groundwork and get you guys what you do need to get you out of the mid game. A good first goal would be upgrading your jewelry to the Zenite tier. You want the Amulet of Torture for melee, the Anguish for your range skill, and then also the Tormented Bracelet for magic. These are all solid upgrades, and they all cost around 15 mil each. There are so many special attack weapons in this game, but to get your bases covered, I suggest investing in a Bandos Godsword and getting a Crystal Halberd as well. This is going to give you a defense lowering spec, and the Crystal Halberd is really good for the Theater of Blood. For your melee setup, I recommend investing in an Osmumten's Fang. They're around 30 mil right now, and it's going to be your best in slot for a ton of different activities. Anything with high defense, you're going to want to use the Fang for. It's really good for the Theater of Blood, the Tombs of Amasket, and the Chambers of Zarek, which are going to be some of your main late game moneymakers. So you definitely don't want to skip out on this one. Then I also suggest getting a Tentacle Whip. I like to keep a Tentacle and a normal whip in the bank. This is good as a poison weapon for the Theater of Blood and as a slash weapon for the same content as well. It's a really good 4-tick attack weapon for monsters with lower defense or monsters that you have lowered their defense. For your magic setup, nothing too fancy. I recommend upgrading to Arums. It's about 6.5 mil right now, and it's going to give you a good amount of accuracy and defense. The Rune Pouch is also a must-have. You can get this from Slayer, some other sources like Last Man Standing. Just look it up on the wiki and you can find a method that works the best for you, but this is going to allow you to carry 3 different types of runes all in one slot in your inventory. I understand the jump in cost on this one is going to be a little bit nuts compared to the other categories, but I want you to get Crystal and the Bofa. This one can be a little bit more of a long-term goal for you. It's going to cost you about 100 mil for the Bofa and around 30 million for the Crystal. It's a little bit less than that. It's like 125 million combined right now. But this setup right here is so powerful. It's going to carry you through so many different pieces of content. The Inferno is super doable in this setup. You can do the chambers with it. It can be brought into the Tombs of Amasket. You will never bring this into the Theater of Blood, but it can also be used on tons of other areas of the game. I cannot understate how much of a game changer this is for the mid game. Before the release of Crystal and the Bofa, you basically had to get a Twisted Bow to do a lot of this endgame content, but this setup right here costs less than 10% of just the Twisted Bow, let alone the rest of the T-Bow setup, and it allows you to participate in ways that you previously could not. Oh, you guys thought I forgot the Void setup? Time to go back and erase your comments that you wrote about it. Anyways, this is a great time for you to fill out your Void set. You get 3 extra pest control points from doing the hard combat achievements, so that's why I mentioned that before talking about Void, which greatly speeds up the process of getting it. Personally, I really don't like pest control very much. I don't find it super duper fun or anything like that, so speeding it up is great. Just get Elite Void done, get all of your helms as well. They are great for a ton of different combat, like the Theater of Blood and Vorkath, specifically the range setup. The magic and melee have less uses, but they're good for learning the Theater of Blood and some other niche things. I think it's definitely worth putting in the time to get them. Once you have these completed, just keep on upgrading your gear as more GP comes into the bank. Welcome to the endgame. I'm guessing this is where most of the people who are watching this video's accounts are at this point of the game. You have the levels on your account, you have the gear on your account to do any piece of content in the game. The only thing that is currently holding back is you and your mindset. Circling back to that problem that we discussed at the very beginning of the video, my advice to you is just do harder and harder content progressively over time. There's a few pieces of content that are really good for teaching you mechanics that are going to be used a lot in raids, other than just doing the raids themselves, which you can just jump in and learn that way. That is a great way to learn it, but I do really like the Corrupted Gauntlet. The Corrupted Gauntlet really forces you to think about your pathing in game, how your character moves around, how you eat and pray at the same time. If you're not quite there, you can start with the regular gauntlet. Zulrah's really good for this as well, along with the fight caves. But ultimately, just remember to have fun with it. This is the most fun phase of the game, in my opinion. There's so many new things to learn. There's so many new pieces of gear for you to obtain. And you can just have fun raiding with the boys. Once again, if you're feeling burnt out at all, take a break. This whole video has some pretty lofty goals, and they're going to take any reasonable person a very large amount of time, and you shouldn't be playing this game as if it's a full-time job. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, you will probably also enjoy my last video about maxing your old school RuneScape account. I'll leave that element somewhere up here on screen.